Okay, continue on from where we left off last week. I think we were covering chapter 8, and we didn't finish, if I remember correct. So we're going to read from chapter 8, verse 16 and on. In the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, when Jehoshaphat was a king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done for the daughters of Ahab was his wife. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah for the sake of David his servant, since he promised to give a lamb to him and to his sons forever. In these days Edom revolted from the rules of Judah and set up a king of their own. Then Joram passed over Zaire with all his chariots and rose by night. And he and his chariots' commanders struck the Edomite who was surrounded him, but his army fled home. So Edom revolted from the rule of Judah to this day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time. Now the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the books of Judah? So Joram slept with his fathers and was buried with his father in the city of David, and Ahaziah his son reigned in his place. So when we look at actually the story here, there's two things we have to have to understand. One is, who is the king of Israel and who is the king of Judah? So when we look at this one, so right now in Israel, or as I mentioned, the book of Kings will cover both north of Israel and their work, and also south of Judah. When you look at the Chronicles, it only covers a majority of the south, the kings of the south of Judah, not north of Israel. So when we actually read the First Kings and Second Kings, we have to focus on who is ruling north of Israel, while who is ruling the south of Judah. Otherwise, we're going to get very confused at who's who. Okay, so let's figure it out. Who is the king of Israel? So when we look at the verse 16, in the 5th year of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel. So right now, the king in Israel is Joram. Just to keep that in mind, because you're going to get confused with this particular piece. Okay, so let's just jot it down. Joram is the king of Israel, but he's the king. He's the actually son of Ahab. Okay. So we remember the very first chapter of 2 Kings. There was his brother was the king, but he had a problem with his foot, and then who actually asked his servant to go and required of Baal-zebub, right? And he that was Ahaziah, which was his brother, right? Ahaziah was Ahab's son, and he was ruling at first, and then after he died, and Joram took over the kingship. And at that time, in Judah, continue on from verse 16, when Jehoshaphat was a king of Judah. So Joram was the king of Israel. Jehoshaphat is the kings of Israel. Of Judah. Okay, keep that in mind, because the reason I'm actually emphasizing this is because when you look at the king's name, when you look at the king's names in Israel and king's name in Judah, it's almost the same, but it's a flipped. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about it, because you're gonna hear the Joram's name again. You're gonna hear the Jehoshaphat, but one in Jehoshaphat in Israel and Jehoshaphat in Judah. There's Joram in north Israel and Joram there is in south of Judah. So you have to understand which king is which. So for now, just to organize it, once again, north of Israel is Joram, is the king right now, and south of Judah, Jehoshaphat is the king. Okay? And then continue on, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. So Jehoram, right? Jehoram, Joram, it's the same name. Okay, it's the same name. So you can think of it as Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah, but his son Jehoram started to reign in Judah. Okay, so you get that? So Joram, north of Israel, Jehoshaphat was the king, but his son Jehoram started to reign in south of Judah. And he was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. So when he started ruling the south of Judah, he was 32 years old when he became a king. And he ruled for 8 years. Just to keep that in mind, because I'm going to come back and explain this. The verse 18 is very important, and 18 and 19. And he walked. Who? Who is he at this point? Who are we referring when he said he? Good. Correct. It's Jehoram. Walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for the daughters of Ahab was his wife. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So Jehoram is the king of the Judah. Right? He was the king of the Judah. But he married to who? Ahab's daughter. So Ahab's wife is who? Jezebel, right? So just to keep that in mind, the relationship between the south of Judah and north of Israel, because this is very important for you to understand. Okay? So Jehoram married to Ahab's daughters. Okay? So Ahab's daughter's name is Athaliah, which is we're going to read about it later on. Athaliah is the wife of Jehoram. But he, from the Lord's perspective, even though he was the king of the south of Judah, God treated him as he was the king of Israel. Okay? Verse 19. Yet the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah for the sake of David his servant, since he promised to give a lamb to him and to his sons forever. What it means is that God wanted to destroy Jehoram, but God did not put off the light of the south of Judah because of David, because he made a promise to David that he didn't want to put off this light of David's. So from God's perspective, Jehoram and Joram, they both acted the same way. Let's continue on from verse 25. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Once again. In 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah. She was the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He also walked in the way of the house of Ahab, and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done, for he was a son-in-law to the house of Ahab. Understanding this particular piece is very important. Reason is, God said God is going to destroy the Ahab's he's a dynasty, and he's actually family. He's going to just destroy them all. So if God is going to destroy them, what does that really mean? Is what we really need to understand. All right, so let me see. In verse 27, he also walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done, for he was a son-in-law to the house of Ahab. When he went with Joram, the son of Ahab, to make war against Hazael, king of Assyria, at Ramoth Gilead, and Syrians wounded Joram. The king Joram returned to the healed in Jezreel of the wound that the Syrian had given him at Ramah. When he fought against the Hazael, king of Assyria, and Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel, because he was sick. Obviously, when you look at it, so Joram is between the Jehoram and Joram. What is the relation between the two? That's correct. They're the brother-in-law. So since they're the brother-in-law, well, obviously they were close. So that's why the Joram was, when he was sick, Jehoram wanted to actually visit Joram to see how he's doing. But before we go over there, we're just going to take a look at the Second Chronicle. Let's go to Second Chronicle, chapter 21. Second Chronicle, chapter 21. Okay. Got it? We're going to read from here. Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers and was buried with his father in the city of David, and Jehoram his son reigned in his place. He had brothers, the son of Jehoshaphat, Azariah, Jehiel, and Zechariah, Azariah, Mikael, and Shephatiah. All these were the sons of Jehoshaphat, king of Israel. Their father gave them a great gift of silver, gold, and valuable possessions, together with fortified a city in Judah, but he gave the kingdom of Jehoram because he was the firstborn. When the Jehoram had ascended the throne of his father and was established, he killed all his brothers with the sword, and also some of the princes of Israel. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king and reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. So these gives us a little more insight as to some things that we did not see in a second king. Jehoram, the son of actually south of Judah, when he became a king, he was a very wicked person. He actually killed all his brothers. So you can see how wicked he was. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. Once again, even though he was a king of the south of Judah, they walked the same way as the kings of Israel, which is to walk in the same way as Jehoshaphat, which was the very first king of Israel. And he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel at the house of Ahab had done. So he followed exactly the same trail as the family of Ahab. For the daughters of Ahab was his wife, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord was not willing to destroy the house of David because of the covenant that he made with David, and since he had promised to give a lamb to him and to his sons forever. In his days, Edom revolted from the rule of Judah and set up a king of their own. Then Jehoram passed over with his commanders and all his chariots, and he rose by night and struck the Edomites, who had surrounded him and his chariots commanders. So Edom revolted from the rules of Judah to this day. At that time, Libnah also revolted from his rules because he had forsaken the Lord and God of his fathers. So God actually made Edomites as well as Libnah to revolt against Judah, to teach him, just like what he did when the times of the judges. He used the surrounding country to attack the Judah, to let them know that God's wrath is upon them so they can return back to the Lord. But obviously, none of them really, even care or wanted to do anything with it, right? Moreover, he made high places in the hill country of Judah and led the inhabitants of Jerusalem into weirdom and made Judah go astray. So he actually, brought the people from Israel and then actually gotten worse. And a letter came to him from Elijah the prophet, saying, Thus says the Lord, the God of David your father, because you have not walked in the ways of the Jehoshaphat your father, or in the ways of Asa king of Judah, but have walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, and have enticed Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem into the whoredom, as the house of Ahab led Israel into the whoredom, and also you have killed your brother of your father's house, who were better than you. Behold, the Lord will bring a great plague on your people, your children and your wives, and all your possessions. So let's just talk about this. Was Jehoshaphat, his father, was he the somewhat like, was he a faithful to the Lord, or, he was actually, similar to Jehoram? How was it? That's correct. That's exactly correct. So his father, Jehoshaphat, was a faithful man. At least he was actually believing the Lord, and when he was actually going to war with Ahab, he was the one who was seeking the prophets, whether God is actually, allowing them to just to go to the war, right? Remember? So Jehoshaphat was a faithful person, but the question is, why did he pick Jehoram as the succeeded king, which was like very wicked king? Because according to the scripture here, his brothers were better than him. And if he was a faithful person, shouldn't he actually pick the better person who actually worshiped the Lord? What do you think? Shouldn't he be actually picked the better son to become a king of Judah? Because the reason I'm asking this is because it gives us some lessons from this. Just because we are faithful does not mean that we have a full insight of picking the right son to become a better, a good king over their own land. Let's continue on. Verse 18. No. Wait a second. Where is it? Verse 14. Behold, the Lord will bring a great plague on your people and your children, your wives, and all your possessions. So God told Jehoram that I am going to actually bring down the plague. He already actually brought the revolt, from the surrounding countries. But at the same time, that's not good enough because they're not returning to the Lord. And God is actually telling them, I'm going to actually bring more plagues, on your land. And why is God doing this? Because God wants them to come back to the Lord and realize that God is actually punishing them. But Jehoram nor anyone in the land of Judah cared. They just did not want to listen to the Lord or care about what God said. And you yourself will have a severe sickness with the disease of your bowels until your bowels come out because of the disease day by day. So this is the third one. So first of all, he made the surrounding countries to revolt, number one. Second, he brought the plague over to this country. And third, he actually made them sick. So he just kind of like letting him know that God is doing this. But he doesn't want to listen. He doesn't want to acknowledge what God said. He doesn't want to believe anything what God said. So, this is one of the things that we have to remember. This is something that we've been talking about for all this time. God cannot do anything about the people, even though He's willing to actually just teach them and letting them know that God is actually doing this. But if you don't turn your ears to the Lord, you will do whatever you want. But what you cannot avoid God's wrath and His punishment. And the Lord has stirred up against Jehoram the anger of the Philistines and Arabians who are near the Ethiopians, and they came up against Judah, invaded, and carried away all the possessions they found that belongs to the king's house, and also his sons and his wives, so that no son was left to him except Jehoahaz, his youngest son. And after all this, the Lord struck him, his bowels, with an incurable disease. In the course of time, at the end of 2 years, his bowel came out because of the disease, and he died in a great agony. His people made no fire in his honors, like the fires made for his fathers. He was 32 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he departed with no one's regret. They buried him in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. So Jehoram wasn't doing a great job at keeping up with the Lord. Although God actually warned him many times, he completely ignored the Lord's warning. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, his youngest son, king in his place. The band of men that came with the Arabians to the camp had killed all the older sons. So Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, reigned. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughters of Omri. He also walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, for his mother was his counselor in doing wickedly. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done. For after the death of his father, they were his counselor, and his undoing. He even followed their counsel, and went with Jehoram the son of Ahab, king of Israel, to make war against Hazael, king of Assyria, at Ramoth Gilead. And Syrian wounded Joram, and he returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds that he had received at Ramah when he fought against Hazael, king of Assyria. And Ahaziah the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram the son of Ahab in Jezreel, because he was wounded. Okay, so let's come back to the second king again. So when you actually read 2 King, you kind of have to just reference both 2 King as well as the 2 Chronicle in order for you to have a big picture. Otherwise, you only see the portions of the story, not seeing the full picture of the story. So it is better to look at both of them at the same time. Okay? Chapter 9, 2 Kings. Then Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, "Tie up your garments and take this flask of oil in your hand and go to Ramoth Gilead, and when you arrive, look there for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and have him rise from among his fellow and lead him to an inner chamber. Then take the flask of oils and pour it on his head and say, 'Thus says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and flee. Do not linger." So the young man, the servant of the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead, and when he came, behold, the commander of the army were in council, and he said, "I have a word for you, O commander." And Jehu said, "To which of us all?" And he said, "To you, O commander." So he rose and went into the house, and the young man poured oil on his head, saying to him, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anoint you king over the people of the Lord over Israel, and you shall strike down the house of Ahab your master, so that I may avenge on Jezebel the blood of my servant the prophet, and the blood of the servant of the Lord. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free, in Israel, and I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. And the dog shall eat Jezebel in the territory of Jezreel, and none shall bury her." Then he opened the door and fled. When Jehu came out to the servant of his masters, and they say to him, "Is all well? Why did this man, a mad fellow, come to you?" And he said to them, "You know the fellow." And he talked, and he said, "This is not true. Tell us now." And he said, "Though." And so he spoke to me, saying, "Thus says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel." Then in haste every man of them took his garment and put it under him on the bare steps, and they blew the trumpet and proclaimed, "Jehu is king." Though Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram, now Joram with all Israel had been on guard at Ramoth Gilead against Hazael, king of Assyria. But King Joram had returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds that he and the Syrians had given him. When he fought with Hazael, king of Assyria, so Jehu said, "If this is your decisions, then let no one slip out of the city to go and tell the news in Jezreel." Then Jehu mounted his chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram lay there. And Ahaziah, king of Judah, had come down to visit Joram. Now a watchman was standing on the tower in Jezreel, and he saw the company of Jehu as he came, and said, "I see a company." And Joram said, "Take a horseman and send to meet him, and let him say, Is it peace?" So the man of horseback went to meet him and said, "Thus says the king, is it peace?" And Jehu said, "What do you have to do with the peace? Turn around and ride behind me." And the watchman reported, saying, "The messenger reached him, but he is not coming back." Then he sent out a second horseman, who came to them and said, "Though the king has said, is it peace?" And Jehu answered, "What do you have to do with peace? Turn around and ride behind me." Again, the watchman reported, "He reached him, but he did not come. He is not coming back." And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he drives furiously. Joram said, make ready. And they made ready for a chariot. Then Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, set out each in his chariots, and went to meet Jehu, and meet him at the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. And when Joram saw Jehu, he said, Is it peace, Jehu? He answered, What peace can there be so long as the whoring and the sorcery of your mother Jezebel are so many? Then Joram reigned about and fled, saying, Ahaziah, treachery, O Ahaziah. And Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between the shoulders, so that the arrow pierced his heart, and he sank in his chariot. Jehu said to Bidkar, his aide, Take him up and throw him on the plot of ground belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember, when you and I rode side by side behind Ahab his father, how the Lord made his pronouncement against him. As surely as I saw yesterday the blood of Naboth, the blood of his sons, declares the Lord, I will repay you on this plot of ground. Now therefore take him up and throw him on the plot of ground in accordance with the word of the Lord. When Ahaziah the king of Judah saw this, he fled in the direction of Beth Hagan. And Jehu pursued him and said, Shot him also. And they shot him in the chariots at the ascent of Gur, which is by Ebelim, and fled to Megiddo and died there. His servant carried him in the chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his tomb with his fathers in the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, Ahaziah began to reign over Judah. Okay. So, as you can see here, God actually anointed Jehu, one of the commander of Joram, through Elisha. So Elisha anointed him to be a king of Israel. And obviously he didn't know, but when he sent the servant to actually anoint Jehu, soon after he was anointed, and his fellow commanders also bowed down before him, and he didn't wait, but he just rode his chariots to run to Jezreel, where Joram was actually laying. And when Jehu saw that, Joram saw that Jehu was running very fast, he told his man, and said, Go and ask him, is it peace? And Jehu said, What does the peace got to do with you? Just behind me. And then the watchman was riding behind him, and he sent the second man and asked for, Jehu, is it peace? And he said the same thing. What has the peace got to do with you? Just get behind me. So the second, watchman also running behind the Jehu. So as you can see here, how fast he was running, and according to the scriptures, that he was running furiously. So this Jehu, the man, seemed to be a very strong guy, and he was, very aggressive guy. It sounds, according to the scripture, and he was just kept running and running, and Joram could not wait. So he himself, with Jehoram, the son, the king of the Judah, they both got on the chariot and went to Jehu and asked, "Is it peace, Jehu? Are you okay?" And then Jehu said, "What peace? How can there be a peace while your mother is actually doing all this kinds of the sorceries and just making this Israel to go down the drain?" So he actually he pulled the bows and shot him, Joram, and his arrow was pierced through his heart. So the arrow just came out of him. So you can see how strong he was, and then just shot him, and then arrow just kind of passed through his heart. And obviously he just trembled on a chariot and he died right there. But the interesting part is when Jehu was running towards the Joram, and Joram actually got on the chariot and he ran towards the Jehu. But the place where they met is Jezreel, where there used to be, or there is, Naboth's vineyard. Remember the Naboth's vineyard? What happened there? Correct. And Jezebel actually killed Naboth, right, to take that possessions of Naboth's vineyard. So where those two people met is actually where the Naboth's vineyard. And you can see God planned this to destroy Joram at the place where his father had done wrong. So let's go back to that particular piece. Let's go to 1 Kings. So let's take a look at chapter 19 first, the 1 King chapter 19 first. First King chapter 19, we're going to read from verse 15 and on. And the Lord said to Elijah, of course, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place." So this is the prophecy that God gave it to Elijah when he was still alive. So he said, anoint Hazael as the king over Syria, and also anoint Jehu to be the king, and whoever, when you look at the verse 16, Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah, you shall anoint to be the prophet in your place. So what happened is Elijah was the one who received the God's command to make the Hazael to be the king of Syria, and also anoint Jehu to be the king of Israel, and then he will be the one who will destroy Ahab, right? But this was not done in the time of Elijah, but rather it was all this work was actually cascaded down to Elisha. Elisha is the one who fulfilled these prophecies. And continue on. So we're going to turn to this time chapter 21, the 1 King, chapter 21. We're going to read from verse 17. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, "Arise, go down to meet Ahab, the king of Israel, who is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he had gone to take possession. And you shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, have you killed and also taken possessions? And you shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, in the place where dogs licked up the blood of a Naboth shall dogs lick your own blood." So Elijah actually went to Ahab and told him, because you've taken the possession of a Naboth's vineyard, the dogs will lick up your blood at the place of a Naboth's vineyard. But obviously, Ahab was not killed at the Naboth vineyard. He died at the battlefield, and the Aramite actually killed him by the arrow. But his son which is a Joram, is the one who got killed. And then he died, and he was dumped into the place where the Naboth vineyard, is. So coming back, to chapter 2 King, chapter 9. So verse 21 again. So let's read it one more time. Joram said, "Make ready," and they made ready his chariot. And Joram king of Israel and Ahaziah king of Judah set out, each in his chariot, and went to meet Jehu, and met him at the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. And when Joram saw Jehu, he said, "Is it peace, Jehu?" He answered, "What peace can there be so long as the whoring and the sorceries of your mother Jezebel are so many?" Then Joram reigned about and fled, saying, "Ahaziah, treachery, O Ahaziah." And Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between the shoulders, so that the arrow pierced his heart and sank in his chariot. Jehu said to Bidkar, his aide, "Take him up and throw him on the plot of ground belonging to Naboth in the Jezreelite. For remember when you and I rode side by side behind Ahab his father, how the Lord made the pronouncements against him." So Jehu remember what Elijah said to Ahab at the time, because at the time Jehu was also the commander when Ahab was actually ruling the country as well, and they remember what God said to Ahab. Verse 26, "As surely as I saw yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, declared the Lord, I will repay you on this plot of ground. Now therefore take him up and throw him on the plot of ground in accordance with the word of the Lord." So Jehu, which was the commander, remember what God actually prophesied to him. But neither Ahab nor his son Joram remember. None of them remember. Why? Because they completely ignored what God said. But Jehu kept it in his heart, and when this was fulfilled by his hand, he realized that now God's, the prophecy is now fulfilled by him. Obviously, he did not know that God will fulfill this prophecy through his hand, but he realized that when he actually killed him at the Jezreel, at the place where Naboth the vineyard is, now he knew this was what was prophesied. Continue on, verse 27. When Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled in the direction of Beth Hagan, and Jehu pursued him and said, "Shoot him also." And they shot him in the chariot at the Sendon of Gur, which is by Ebelim, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. His servant carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his tomb with his fathers in the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, Ahaziah began to reign over Judah. You see the difference between Joram and the Ahaziah? When they died, what happened? What's the difference between Joram and Ahaziah? Exactly. Both kings were killed, but Joram was dumped into the Naboth's vineyard, whereas Ahaziah, the king of Judah, was carried to the tombs of his father, of David. He buried there. They both died and killed, but they treated it differently at the end. And continue on. Verse 30. When Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her eyes and adorned her head and looked out of the window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she said, "Is it peace, you Zimri, murderer of your master?" And he lifted up his face to the window and said, "Who is on my side? Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. He said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled on her. And when he went in and ate and drank, and he said, "See, now to this curse the woman," and buried her, for she is the king's daughter. But when they went out to bury her, they found no more of her than the skulls and the feet and the palm of her hands. When they came back and told him, he said, "This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite. In the territory of Jezreel the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as dung on the face of the field in the territory of Jezreel, so that no one can say, 'This is Jezebel.'" So let's go back to the first king again. Chapter 21. First King, chapter 21. We're going to read from verse 21 and on. "Behold, I will bring disaster upon you. I will utterly burn you up, and will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free, in Israel. And I will make your horse like the horse of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah, for the anger to which you have provoked me, and because you have made Israel to sin. And of Jezebel the Lord also said, The dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel. Anyone belonging to Ahab who died in the city, the dog shall eat, and anyone of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the heavens shall eat." So this was a prophesied to Ahab. Once again, did Ahab remember this? No, he didn't care what God said. He just completely ignored him. Of course, his son, Joram, ignored it as well. None of them pay attention to what God said because they don't trust what God said and they don't really care what God is doing. They just do whatever they feel like to do and they just don't care what God's doing. So this is the part that we need to understand. When God tells us, we have a choice. We either listen to him or ignore him. Whose choice is this? Is that God's purgatory or is that our purgatory? Exactly. It is us. It is not God in control who actually listen to him or not listen to him. God will not force us. God will warn us, give us a sign that God is actually trying to bring us back to where we're supposed to be. But if we completely ignore him, there's no way God can do anything. When we actually give when we deliver the good news to the people, all right, people either have a choice to either accept it or deny it, right? Either listen to it and pay attention and listen to it or ignore it. So, unfortunately, we want to actually save them. We want them to believe. But unfortunately, we have no power or we have no ability to change their heart. It is their heart who needs to change. For the people who continue to ignore and despise God's word, at the end, God has no choice. Because of God is righteous God, right? Because he's the righteous judge, he cannot say, I forgive every sins for you. It does not work that way. God is the judge and righteous judge, and he has to judge at the end. Therefore, at the end, whoever does not listen and does not actually just, want to get out of that way, they will perish, as God said. And it's very unfortunate, but that's exactly what happens. And Jezebel, this woman, is not a normal woman. When Jehu is actually running after her, she looked at the Jehu coming, and she was just making, eyeliner. And she was affixing her hair. She knew Jehu is coming after her. Then she knew that she's going to die. But she didn't care. She was the very strong-willed woman, not compared to Ahab or Joram. She did not run away from Jehu. They said, okay, you come in, come after me. And she was making makeups on her face and then fixing her hair. That's how strong she was. And then she even said, what she said, verse 31, and said, and as Jehu entered the gate, she said, is it peace, you Zimri, murderer of your master? She's so relaxed, even at the last moment. And then Jehu reached out to the place, and it said, who's with me? Anyone with me? And Nunucha said, of course they were with him, because, if it doesn't, obviously they're all going to get killed as well. Right? So, they said, I'm with you. And it said, if you're with me, throw her out. Can you imagine? This scenes that we're actually seeing is just, it is not a pleasant scene at all. So Nuch really throw her out the window. And then she kind of slapped on the wall. I mean, this is really nasty scene. Yeah, it's really nasty. And not only her blood is spatted, it's splashed, right? Jehu, he was riding chariot. He literally ran over her multiple times. It's someone, was just died on the ground, and then you just drove the car over that person, and back and forth. Literally, it's just completely destroyed. And then Jehu went inside and ate and drank. Can you imagine? Yeah. I mean, he ate and drank. And it said, now, I want you to bury her. And when the guy's out there, how Jehu destroyed her and the dog came out and ate her, there's nothing left. Only thing was left is her skull, her palm, her foot. Nothing was left. There's no body. There's no arms. There's no legs. Can you imagine? I mean, this is a kind of horror movie that I watch. I remember a movie Saw, right? I mean, this is a horrible scenes. I mean, that's how God destroyed this woman. And obviously she was completely destroyed. As God said, He will destroy her. And that's not the end. Continue on, chapter 10. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Well, Ahab had a lot of sons. We saw 2 sons, right? First son was who? Who was the first sons that we know? Ahaziah. Right? Ahaziah. Remember I told you that Ahaziah is the Ahab's son? But Ahaziah is also south of Judah's son. The king of Judah. He was killed with Joram. Right? It's the same name. So don't get confused with which Ahaziah we're talking, okay? And then after he died, his brother Joram became a king. So there's two kings that we know, Ahab's sons, right? And besides those two kings, he had 70 other, sons. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, so Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the rulers of the city, to the elders and the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, Now then, as soon as this letter comes to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and there are with you chariots and horses, a fortified city also, and weapons. Select the best and fittest of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. But they were exceedingly afraid, and said, Behold, the two kings could not stand before him. How then can we stand before him? He then can we stand. So he who was over the palace and he who was over the city, together with the elders and the guardians, sent to Jehu, saying, We are your servants, and we will do all that you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever is good in your eyes. Then he wrote to them a second letter, saying, If you are on my side, if you are ready to obey me, take the heads of your master's son and come to me at Jezreel tomorrow at this time. Now the king's sons, 70 persons, were with the great men of the city who were bringing them up. And as soon as the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slaughtered them, 70 persons, and put their heads in basket, and sent them to him at Jezreel. When the messenger came and told him, They have brought the heads of king's sons, he said, Lay them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until the morning. Then in the morning, when he went out, he stood and said to all the people, You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who struck down all these? Know then that there shall fall in the earth of nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord has spoke concerning the house of Ahab, for the Lord had done what he said by his servant Elijah. So Jehu struck down all who remained of the house of Ahab, down all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men and his close friends and his priests, until he left them none remaining. Then he set out and went to Samaria. Out on the way, when he was at Beth-Eked of Shepherd, Jehu met the relative of Ahaziah king of Judah, and he said, Who are you? And they answered, We are the relative of Ahaziah, and we came down to visit the royal prince and the sons of the queen mother. He said, Take them alive. And they took them alive and slaughtered them at the pit of Beth-Eked, 42 persons, and he spared none of them. Jehu completely destroyed Ahab's family, as well as the family of King of Judah. He destroyed both kings and their family altogether. And now I want you to know this. How did this happen? God is thanking both Ahab's family as well as Jehoram's family. God treated them the same family. They treated them the same family. It is very important to know, even though they are the king of Judah and the family of the Judah's king, it did not matter. If you follow the same way as the Ahab and Jeroboam, even though they are two different families, one in Israel and one in Judah, God treats them the same way, as if they are part of the Ahab's family. This is critically important. God makes no distinction whatsoever. Continue on, verse 15. And when he departed from there, he met Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. I want you to just underline Jehonadab, the son of Rechab. Actually, I did mention about Rechab's family before, but just to put an underline. And he greeted him and said to him, Is your heart true to my heart as mine is to yours? And Jehonadab answered, It is. Jehu said, If it is, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand, and Jehu took him up with him into the chariot. And he said, Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. Just put an underline there as well. Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. And he had him ride in his chariot, and when he came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained to Ahab in Samaria, till he had wiped them out according to the word of the Lord that he spoke to Elijah. So as you can see here, God completely destroyed Ahab's family. None left. Not only his wife, but also all his sons and everyone belonging to Ahab's family. He just killed them all and slaughtered them. Completely destroyed. You have to remember, God's judgment is a scary thing. When he's mad and he poured out his wrath on earth, he completely wipes out. There's no mercy. There's no pity at all. It's just complete destroy them. When people reach to that point, they will be scared to death. But it's too late. We certainly don't want people to face this judgment. But unfortunately, people will choose to be in this. Let's continue on. Verse 18. Then Jehu assembled all the people and said to him, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much. Now therefore, call to me all the prophets of Baal, all his worshipper, and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu ordered, Sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal. So they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. He said to him, who was in charge of the wardrobe, Bring out the vestment for all the worshippers of Baal. So he brought out the vestment for them. Then Jehu went into the house of Baal with Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, and he said to the worshipper of Baal, Search, and see there is no servant of the Lord here among you, but only the worshippers of Baal. Then they went in to offer sacrifice and burnt offering. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and said, The man who allowed any of those whom I give into your hands to escape shall forfeit his life. Soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and to the officer, Go in and strike them down. Let not a man escape. So when they put them to the sword, and guard and the officer cast them out and went into the inner room of the house of Baal, and they brought out the pillar that was in the house of Baal and burnt it. And they demolished the pillars of Baal and demolished the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. So as you can see here, Not only he destroyed Ahab and his families and everything belonged to Ahab, but also destroyed the Baals and worshiper of Baals. And he was the, kind of came up with an idea to bring all the worshiper of the Baals in one room, and then made them to sacrifice. And while he was plotting, with all his guardian and officers, and said, now we have everybody in the room. We're just going to destroy them all at once. We don't have to trace after everyone. Now everyone is in one room. We're just going to destroy them all. And then, after they finished the sacrifice, had the man, he ordered it. If anyone escape out of this room, you're going to have to pay for their life. So if you don't want to die, you have to kill every single of them in this room. And obviously no one wanted to die. So you could imagine they went in and they just literally slaughtered them. So this is kind of like, complete, what is it? The God is literally wiping out everyone in Ahab's family and every Baal worshippers, and one all at once. Verse 28, Then Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel, but this is the key word, but Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin, that is, the golden calves that were in Bethel and in Dan. Remember I told you many, many times about this, the golden calves. God hates the most, right? What was the line that I actually just put the underline? What did he say? No. Before. Remember, I actually just he might have zeal for the Lord. He has a zeal for the Lord, but halfway. Not totally devoted to the Lord, but halfway he had a zeal. It's not like he didn't have a zeal. He did have a zeal to destroy all the worshiper of Baal, but at the same time, on the other half of his heart, is that I want to continue to worship this golden calf that was set up by Jeroboam up in north of Dan and south of Bethel. He kept that. He did not destroy that. In verse 30, And the Lord said to Jehu, Because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my eyes, which is destroying Ahab's family, as well as the destroying all the Baal's worshiper, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. God has promised, because you had done right things that it pleased my heart, even though you're worshiping the golden calf, I will keep your throne up to fourth generations, and after that I'm going to cut you off. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord and God of Israel with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin. This is very important. As I mentioned, it's not like Jehu did not have a zeal for the Lord. He did have a zeal for the Lord, and he did execute it the way that God told him to do, but not fully. He has one part of his heart following the Lord, but the other part of the heart did not follow. And God warned him, because you had done right, I'm going to keep your throne up to your fourth generation. So God warned him. At this point, Jehu could have turned his heart and said to the Lord, Lord, I have sinned against you, Lord. I am going to walk with you. Then God could have actually turned his heart to keep his throne. But he himself ignored what God said, even after he saw what happened to Ahab's family. Did I say that Ahab and Jeroboam did not worship the Lord? They did worship the Lord. They did worship the Lord. But the problem is, they worship the Lord while they worshiping other gods. From our perspective, well, at least they worship the Lord. It's not like they completely ignored the gods, right? They did not worship, but they did worship. Shouldn't they be actually treated differently then? From God's perspective? No. Halfway is the same as none. What about this? 80% and 20% not. 90% and 10%. 95% and 5%. It's like, what do you mean 95%? I mean, that's a lot, right? Then let me tell you this. If we keep God's command, right, 9 of them, we did not keep 1 of the command. Did we succeed or we fail? Unfortunately, fail. You have to keep them all. But once again, is it possible to keep them all? Remember I mentioned to you that, when the rich young man came to Jesus, and then he wanted to actually, want to know how he can receive the eternal life, right? And, what must I do to receive eternal life? And God said, you know what God said. Oh, then he said, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. I did all this from youth. What else do you want from me? Right? And God pointed out one thing, right? I want you to sell all your belongings and follow me. Well, he kept everything except one, right? He kept everything except one, but still failed. Then, this is the part where we need to understand. Can anyone to reach and follow the God's command all the way so that we receive the eternal life? No. There's no one. This is why I said no one can reach the righteousness of God. No one. So can we possess the eternal life by practicing the law? No way. This is why Jesus had to come. Because no one can follow or walk the God's law, be perfect. No way we can. This is why Jesus had to come and die for us, because there's no one can do this. And Jehu had a zeal, but he also had a zeal for golden calf as well. So how about us? We truly believe the Lord. We worship the Lord. We adore Him. We praise Him. We have a zeal for the Lord. What about the zeal for this world? We only have a zeal for the Lord? I don't have any other zeals? Can you raise your hand if you said, like, I'm 100% devoted to the Lord and I have no other zeal? Well, obviously none. Right? None. None of us. This is why it is God's grace. Which means if we cannot follow God's, law, then our family, all right, and my descendants will be in the same position as Ahab's family and Jehu's family, to be destroyed. But fortunately, we don't have to, because Jesus came and died for us and cleanse our sins. Once again, Jehu did not listen to God's command, just like Ahab did, even though he's the one who destroyed Ahab's family, and he's the one who destroyed everything. He still does not follow God's command, and he knew what would happen to him if he does not follow, but he did it anyway. That's how stubborn we are. We think we're not stubborn. Yes, we are very stubborn. Verse 32. In those days the Lord began to cut off parts of Israel. Hazael defeated them throughout the territory of Israel, from the Jordan eastward, and all the land of Gilead and Gadites, and the Reubenites and Manassites from Aroer, which is by the valley of Arnon, that is Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the act of Jehu, and all that he did, and all his might, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Jehu slept with his father, and they buried him in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, reigned in his place. The time that Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. Well, obviously, because of what he did to destroy the Ahab's family and destroyed all the followers of Baal, obviously he died in peace. He did not see his family completely destroyed. Think about this. Remember, God told Elijah that he's going to destroy Ahab's family. Right? And then dogs will lick his blood. But how come he didn't do that when Ahab was still alive? Why Joram's days God destroyed them? What not when Ahab was living? Can you imagine? I don't even know whether he was dearly repenting, but just the one repentance, God turned his heart. Just because he just repented once, even though he had done all these wicked things in his life. That's how God is gracious to really. He doesn't want anyone to be destroyed. He doesn't want any wicked to die. He wants everyone to live. Going back to Ezekiel chapter 33, this is something we just kept reading time after time. All right? Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 10 and on. And you, son of man, say to the house of Israel, though have you said, surely our transgressions and our sins are upon us, and we rot away because of them. How then can we live? Say to them, as I live, declare the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn back from your evil ways, for why will you die, O house of Israel? This is God's heart. He doesn't want any wicked one to die. God takes no pleasure whatsoever, even wicked. He is telling people to come back. But who's not coming back? Obviously, we are. Right? We're the one who's not coming back. This is something we have to really understand. God's heart is not to destroy everyone. God's heart is to save everyone, not to destroy. Chapter 11, coming back to 2 Kings. Chapter 11. Now, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she rose and destroyed all the royal family. Do you know what that means? Which family? Literally, she killed all her grandson. He saw his son die. As soon as she heard the news that his son died, he destroyed all her grandson. Can you imagine that? What kind of woman is this? She's even worse than Jezebel. At least Jezebel didn't do this. Like mother, like daughter. And she's even worse. It's like a version 2. It's an upgraded one. I mean, she is so wicked woman that she's even worse than, her mother. Athaliah is even worse than, her mother Jezebel. She literally destroyed all her grandson. And there's a reason why she did that. We're going to find out. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, stole him away from among the king's sons who were being put to death, and she put him and his nurse in the bedroom, though they hid him from Athaliah, so that he was not put to death. And he remained with her 6 years hidden in the house of the Lord, while Athaliah reigned over the land. Do you know why she killed her grandson? Yeah, but why? Exactly. She wanted to become a ruler of the land of Judah. She had the zeal to become the queen of Judah. Can you imagine that? I mean, of course, I have seen this kind of stories in human history in many places, right? Now, so let's start from Ahaziah. Ahaziah is his son Jehoram, right? After Jehoram, who become Jehoram and then Ahaziah, right? And then Ahaziah after, not brothers. So Jehoshaphat, and he had a son, Jehoram. Jehoram has a son, Ahaziah, all right, after Ahaziah died, and then Athaliah became queen of Judah, right? You get that? Yes, this is why I mentioned before. Like, don't get confused with the story. Jehoshaphat was the so. Unfortunately, like I don't have like. Let me see if I can actually share this one with my phone. Hang on. I don't know if this is possible or not, but let's try. Since I don't have like my computer not working with the internet here. Just give me 1 second. All right, let me see if I can share this. Let me actually download this one. Try it again. Google Drive. And then we're going to come back to this. I'm going to leave this one here. All right. Second Chronicle, chapter 20. No. This is not this. 22, right? No, actually not 22. I'm sorry. Yeah, chapter 2 King chapter 11. We're going to read from verse 4. But in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and brought the captains of the Karite and of the guard, and had them come to him in the house of the Lord, and he made a covenant with them, and put them under oath in the house of the Lord, and he showed them the king's sons, and he commanded them, this is the thing that you shall do. 1/3 of you, those who come off duty on the Sabbath, and guard the king's house, another third being at the gate, and a third at the gate behind the guard, shall guard the palace. And the 2 division of you which come on duty in force on the Sabbath, and guard the house of the Lord on behalf of the kings, shall surround the king, each with his weapons in his hand, and whoever approaches the ranks is to be put to death. Be with the kings when he goes out and when he comes in. The captains did according to all the Jehoiada the priest commanded, and they each brought his men who were to go off duty on the Sabbath, with those who were to come on duty on the Sabbath. It came to Jehoiada the priest. And the priest gave the captains the spears and shields that had been King David's, which were in the house of the Lord. And the guard stood every man with his weapons in his hand, from the south side of the house to the north side of the house, round the altar and the house on behalf of the kings. Then he brought out the king's sons and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king and anointed him, and they clapped their hands and said, long live the king. When Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and the people, she went into the house of the Lord to the people, and when she looked, there was a king standing by the pillars, according to the custom, and the captains and the trumpeters beside the kings, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets. And Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, Treason! Treason! Then Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains who were set over the army, bring her out between the ranks, and put to death with the sword anyone who followed her. For the priest said, let her not be put to death in the house of the Lord. So they laid hands on her, and she went through the horses' entrance to the king's house, and there she was put to death. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and people, and that they should be Lord's people, and also between the kings and the people. Then all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore down his altar and his image. They broke in pieces, and they killed Mattan the priest of Baal before the altars. And the priest posted watchmen over the house of the Lord, and took the captains of the guard, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, marching through the gate of the guard to the king's house. And he took his seat on the throne of the kings. And so all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Athaliah had been put to death with the sword at the king's house. Remember, how many years did Athaliah rule? 6 years. And 7th year, now she was killed, and his grandson, right, became the king. Once again, 6 represent what? Man's number, right? And Athaliah was destroyed on the 7th year, which was what? She ruled for 6 years, and 7th year is that she was killed. Continue on, verse 13. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, became the reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 17 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin. Huh? Wait a second. Am I reading the right? No. We skipped it, right? We skipped the 12, sorry. Chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash began to reign, and reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And Jehoash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all his days, because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away. The people continued to sacrifice and making offerings on the high places. Jehoash said to the priest, all the money of the holy things that is brought into the house of the Lord, the money for which each man is assessed, the money from the assessment of the person, and the money that the man's heart prompt them to bring into the house of the Lord. Let him priest take each from his donors, and let him repair the house wherever any needs of repair is discovered. But by the 23rd years of King Jehoash, the priest had made no repair on the house. Therefore King Jehoash assumed Jehoiada the priest and the other priests, and said to them, Why are you not repairing the house? Now therefore take no more money from your donors, but hand it over for the repairs of the house. So the priests agreed that they should take no more money from the people, so they should not repair the house. Then Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in the lid on it, and set it beside the altar of the right side as enter the house of the Lord. And the priest who guarded the threshold put it in all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. And whenever they saw that there was much money in the chest, the king's secretary and the high priest came up, and they bagged and counted the money that was found in the house of the Lord. Then they would give the money that was weighted out into the hands of the workman who had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they paid it out to the carpenters and builders who worked on the house of the Lord, and to the masons and the stone cutters, as well as to buy timber and quarried stone for making repair on the house of the Lord, and for any outlay for the repairs of the house. But there were not many, not made for the house of the Lord, basin of silvers, a snuffer, bowls, and trumpet, and any vessels of gold, or of a silver from the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. For that was given to the workmen who were repairing the house of the Lord with it. And they did not ask for an accounting from the man into whose hand they delivered the money to pay out to the workmen, for they dealt honestly. The money from the guilt offering and the money from the sin offering was not brought into the house of the Lord. It belongs to the priest. At the time, Hazael, king of Assyria, went up and fought against the Geth and took it. But when Hazael set his face to go up against Jerusalem, Jehoash, king of Judah, took all the sacred gift that Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, his father, the king of Judah, had dedicated in his own sacrifice gift, that all the gold that was found in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the king's house, and sent this to Hazael, king of Assyria. Then Hazael went away from Jerusalem. Now, the rest of the act of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicle of the kings of Judah? His servant arose and made a conspiracy and struck down Joash in the house of Millo on the way that goes down to Silla. It was Jozachar, the son of Shimeath, the Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servant, who struck them down so that he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah, his son, reigned in his place. So this time we're going to just turn to 2nd Chronicle. 2nd Chronicle. 2nd Chronicle, we're going to read from chapter 22. We're going to read from chapter 22. One second. Well, since we don't have a whole lot of time, you can just read chapter 22 and chapter 23 yourself. And then we're going to just jump to chapter 24. Make sure you read the chapter 22 and 23 from 2nd Chronicle, okay? Chapter 24. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba, and Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada got for him 2 wives, and he had the sons and daughters. After this, Joash decided to restore the house of the Lord, and he gathered the priest and the Levites, said to him, Go out to the cities of Judah and gather from all Israel money to repair the house of your God from year to years, and see that you act quickly. But the Levites did not act quickly. So the king summoned Jehoiada the chief and said to him, Why have you not required the Levites to bring in from Judah and Jerusalem to tax Levite by Moses? Levite by Moses, so servant of the Lord and congregation of Israel, for the tent of testimony. For the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, had broken into the house of God, and had also used all the dedicated things of the house of the Lord for the Baal. So the king commanded, and they made the chest and set it outside the gates of the house of the Lord, and proclamations was made throughout the Judah and Jerusalem to bring in for the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, laid on Israel in the wilderness. And all the princes and all the people rejoiced and brought tax and dropped it into the chest until they had finished. And whenever chest was brought to the king's officer by the Levites, when they saw that there was much money in it, the king's secretary and officer of the chief priest would come and empty the chest and take it and return to it to its place, though they did day after day the collected money in abundance. And the king and Jehoiada gave it to those who had a charge of the work of the house of the Lord, and they hired masons and carpenters to restore the house of the Lord, and also workers in iron and bronze to repair the house of the Lord. So those who were engaged in the work labored, and the repairing went forward in their hands, and they restored the house of God to its proper conditions and strengthened it. And when they had finished, they brought the rest of the money before the king and Jehoiada. With it were made utensils for the house of the Lord, both the service and for the burnt offering, and dishes for the incense and vessels of gold and silver. And they offered burnt offering in the house of the Lord regularly all the days of Jehoiada. But Jehoiada grew older and full of days, and died. He was 130 years old at his death. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel and towards God and his house. Now, after the death of Jehoiada, the prince of Judah came and paid homage to the king. Then the king listened to them, and they abandoned the house of the Lord and God of their fathers, and served Asherim and the idols. And wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for the guilt of theirs. Yet he sent prophet among them to bring them back to the Lord. They testified against them, but they would not pay attention. Same thing. Even though Jehoiada, the priest, was, guarding him to teach him how to actually rule the Judah, he listened to it. But soon as Jehoiada died, he just turned his heart and started worshiping the idol, just like anyone else. So God sent the prophet to warn him, turn back his heart, but he completely ignored, and he did not follow the God's word. Continue on, verse 20. Then the Spirit of God clothed Zechariah. Once again, Spirit of God has also appeared on Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest, and he stood above the people and said to them, Thus says God, why do you break the commandments of the Lord, so that you cannot prosper? Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. But they conspired against him, and by command of the king they stoned him with stones in the court of the house of the Lord. Though Joash the king did not remember the kindness that Jehoiada, Zechariah's father, had shown him, but killed his sons. And when he was dying, he said, May the Lord see and avenge. At the end of the years, the army of the Syrians camped up against Joash. They came to Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed all the prince of the people from among the people, and sent all their spoils to the kings of Damascus. Though the army of the Syrians had come with few men, the Lord delivered into their hands a very great army, because Judah had forsaken the Lord and the God of their fathers, though they executed judgment on Joash. When they had departed from him, leaving him severely wounded, his servant conspired against him because of the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest, and killed him on his bed. So he died, and they buried him in the city of David, but they did not bury him in the tombs of the kings. Those who conspired against him were Zabad, the son of Shimeath, and Ammonites, Jehozabad, the son of Shimrith, the Moabite, accounts of his sons and the many oracles against him and of the rebuilding of the house of God are written in the story of the book of Kings, and Amaziah his son reigned in his place. So when you look at him, right, he literally followed the Lord when Jehoiada the priest was guarding him, teaching him, and nurturing him to follow the Lord, and he did. And he also restored the God's temple. But at the end, when Jehoiada priest died, he just turned his heart and start worshiping the idols and such, right? Which is bad, and God actually warned him through the priest Jehoiada's son Zechariah, and God put the Spirit of the Lord on him to warn him dearly, but Joash did not listen to the Lord, and he stoned him. He did not remember the mercy and kindness that his father had done for him. And then God also brought the Hazael and attacked the Judah, and he still did not listen. He was wounded, and finally he was murdered. Now, the reason that I'm actually going through all this story is because it is very, very important for every one of us to remember. Now, this time, I want you to go to Matthew this time. Matthew. Everyone's there at Matthew now? Okay, now we're going to read Matthew chapter 1. Okay, we're going to read from verse 6. And Jesse, the father of David the king, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah. Do you find something interesting here? Look at the sharing screen that I have. All right, we're going to start from Rehoboam, the sons of Solomon. You with me? Okay, so we're going to start with the Solomon, the father of Rehoboam. Okay, on verse 7. Rehoboam, the father of Abijah. You see the Abijah here? Abijah, father of Asaph. Right? And Asaph, the father of Jehoshaphat. So, Abijah is Rehoboam, the father of Abijah, and Abijah, father of Asaph. So, who's Asaph here then? No, Asa is the same. It's Asaph and it's Asa. And Asaph, the father of Jehoshaphat. You see Jehoshaphat? Jehoshaphat, the father of Joram, which is Jehoram. Okay? And then Joram, the father of Uzziah. Where's Uzziah? You see this? At the bottom? So, we're fine up to Jehoshaphat and Jehoram, right? And then, what happened after that? Ahaziah, Athaliah, Joash, Amaziah was fully skipped. Right? It's just, the whole generation is completely skipped. Starting from Ahaziah through Amaziah, it just completely skipped. It's not there. And it says in verse 8, right, at the end, Joram, the father of Uzziah. Joram is not the father of Uzziah. Uzziah's father is Amaziah, right? But completely skipped the 4 generations here. Why? Because God considered all these 3 kings and 1 queen to be part of the family of Ahab. God completely removed them from the chronicle or the genealogy of Jesus. Just taken out of them. People don't pay attention when they read the Matthew here. But if you understand the history, you understand exactly what God did. God actually considered all this 4th generation of kings of Judah is considered non-exist, as if they're not part of the history of the King David. Completely removed from genealogy Jesus, because God considered them as part of the Ahab's family. And jump right into Joram, right into Uzziah. You see that? So this is something we have to remember. Just because they are the physical blood of King David, God does not consider them as part of the David's descendants. Which means, when God sees this, remember I told you that just because we go to church, just because we say, like, I believe in Jesus Christ, doesn't mean anything. God has to consider me as the believer of Jesus, not what I claim. A lot of the Israelites, when Jesus came, they claimed, I am Israelites. So God said, who cares about your Israelite? They claimed themselves, I'm the descendants of Abraham. Who cares about your descendants of Abraham? I don't consider you. Right? God could completely abandon us if we don't truly trust Him and follow His way. So this is something we have to keep in mind. Not what we claim. God has to see my faith, and that's what it counts. We are the Gentiles. We are true bloodline of, we don't follow the true bloodline of Abraham, but because of our faith, we are considered to be part of Abraham's family line. That's how we receive the blessings of Abraham. Not because we're descendants of Abraham. We're not, physically, but spiritually we are descendants of Abraham through our faith in Jesus Christ. So, when we read the stories of history of Israel, this is something we need to understand. How God considers us. What makes us to be the true believer? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. One thing I just want to note it here before we close this. Some things. I'm going to point this out to confuse you guys. I want you to turn to 2 Chronicle. 2 Chronicle, chapter 22. I told you guys to read this, chapter 22, 23, later on, okay? But I'm just going to read the very first part of it. 2 Chronicle, chapter 22. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, his youngest son, king in his place. For the band of men that came with the Arabian to the camp, he had to kill all the older sons. So Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, reigned. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother name was Athaliah, and granddaughter of Omri. Okay. Now, each Bible is going to be a little bit different. Okay? So verse 2, how does your Bible reads? Verse 2. Do you see there is a footnote of 22? Any footnote? Anyone? The original Hebrew script says 42. English translations took it 22. There's a big difference between 22 versus 42. Right? There's a big difference. So let's go to the 2 King chapter 8. Second King chapter 8, verse 25. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Joram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother name was Athaliah. She was a granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. The reason that I'm pointing this out, 2 King chapter 8, verse 25 through 26. Yeah. Okay? Now, so whose son is this Ahaziah? Jehoram. Right? Jehoram is his father. Go up, verse 17. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. Right? If 2 Chronicle was right in chapter 22, if he was 42, Ahaziah was 42 years old when he began to reign, what happened? Ahaziah is 1 year older than his father. According to the scriptures in the Hebrew, right? If it's a 42 years old, which means he's 1 year older than his own father. That's why they fixed this to 22. To match with the 2 King chapter 8. Because 2 King chapter 8 verse 25 and 26 says a 22, but in Hebrew scriptures, 2 Chronicle chapter 22 verse 2, it says 42. So they didn't want to say it, so they actually corrected this to 22. Because it makes no sense. Yeah. Right? How can the son be 1 year older than his own father? It doesn't make any sense. So they actually fixed it to 22 years old. The reason that I'm pointing this out is because you will find some of these like in the scripture. Okay? There's some discrepancies in years and names. Okay? The reason that I'm pointing this out is because I don't want you to just take every little thing. Some say, our Bible is 100% accurate. My answer is no, it is not. It's not 100% accurate. What's accurate is original scripture was 100% accurate. But we don't have original script. Entire Old Testament and New Testament original script doesn't exist. What we have is a copy of the original scripture. So when they were actually copying, there was some error that occurred while they're copying the scripture. So you will find there's some discrepancy from one version to another version. However, the entire context does not change. But there is just minor errors in years and names. So I want you to know this. Okay? All right. Any questions about the things that we covered today? Mm-hmm. No, they're not good. That's why we just read it, right? Yeah, so that's we didn't read that part. Next week we're going to read. Right? Amasha, we're going to read about it. Because they're all considered, and they were under the influence of Athaliah. And they considered to be part of the Ahab's family. This is why God is removing them from the genealogy of Jesus. And then we're going to read the rest of the Amasha's the story next week. And of course, he was not a good king either. Until it came to the Uzziah, is the one now has turned their heart towards the Lord. And I was hoping that I could actually finish up the Amasha, but since I did not finish, I didn't want to wait until next week, but I just want to cover, since we covered the majority of them today, so that's why I actually brought that up today.